back to HospitaliTV. Today we have a great friend of mine, Woody Van Horn in house. Thank you for your time, sir. Thanks for being here. If you are in San Diego or the area around here, you've probably seen him around town. He's formerly general manager of Bracero, Cocina, and also Bankers Hill. He's formerly worked at Mr. A's, Bartera, very long pedigree of great restaurants here in the city, and now currently owning his own hospitality company, Woody Van Horn Consulting, is that correct? Hospitality, yeah. Okay. I'm particularly excited about this episode too because I've had the pleasure of working with you before and actually been able to learn a tremendous amount of things, try to find a way to be able to really quantify this information and get it out to other people so that it can help them in their careers and ultimately pass that on to other people within their industry. So thank you for that, and so for you to be here. Thanks for your time.
Yeah.
You worked for Thomas Keller Group of Bouchon for a little bit. One of the things I remember, one of their best practices that they've done, or one of their many things that they do, I know, is their blue tape in the kitchen. They're very adamant about how they treat that. Can you tell us more about that?
Yeah, it started off as blue tape, and then it became green tape. But basically, the nomenclature now that they use in the industry is your blue tape moment. It's like, when did you have that great idea that made the restaurant better? Following along with that Kaizen principle and just constant improvements with whatever you're doing. So for them, it was making sure that we're always neat, tidy, and have our mise en place. So it was always using green tape in the kitchen, or for anything that they're doing with their line or pass or expo or labeling things. Using a Sharpie, doing it the same way every single time, and using scissors and cutting a 90-degree angle.
What happens if somebody didn't use the scissors?
Very rarely happens, but when I would see it, it would be disruptive, but it was kind of like an indicator when I was managing there, that person doesn't have all their mise en place. It doesn't have, for me it was watching, this person is cutting a corner there, where else are they cutting corners? And if you have somebody that is always hitting all the bases, they have a really great service. And so that's what it meant for me from a management standpoint.
Yeah.
And so whatever your standard is, if you're watching, giving your employees examples of or opportunities to skip bases, then you can really dive home and see what else are they skipping.
Right. So speaking of best practices, I remember you showing me a little black book that you had. And I think it was a book that you've had over the course of several restaurant jobs that you've worked at.
Yeah.
And it was basically a book of best practices. Why'd you start doing that? Tell me about that.
Well, I carried a moleskin as a server and captain for many years, and then when I went to culinary school, I started really getting a lot of guest speakers and seeing a lot of really leaders in the industry, like we're here doing now. And when I started seeing all this feedback, I was just taking notes. It was talking about, this was 10 years ago. People talking about coffee service getting messed up in hotels, and when it's talked about chocolate and all these different small little tidbits that I learned over time about how to do a tasting menu, how to do pricing, how to do models, and so I started taking notes on all these, and eventually they just became ingrained. But sometimes you work with people, or you get exposed to a little tiny snippet of professionalism, or that's a great idea, and you don't need it right then, but it's fun to come back on later.
Are you using, I'm sure you're using that now for your own consulting company, or do you think you're going to kind of streamline that and put that maybe into one solid document that you can use, maybe present to others?
I've had people hit me up with
I think you should.
book offers for a long time.
Yes, do it.
But I don't know what kind of book I'd write. But that was one of the things.
It seems like you have it written already.
Yeah, there you go.
It was from everywhere from management practices to actually, I remember one of the graphs that you showed me on, loss leaders and profit margins, on how to manage different products that were selling better than others, and that one kind of always stuck with me too. And
right, and for me, it's one of the things I've learned is there's a lot of people that learn all the numbers because they gravitate towards that in school, but they don't necessarily have the social aspect. And so sometimes those little cliff notes of business practices for front of the house management do come in real handy, because a lot of times you come into this industry or you work in the front of the house because you're great with people or you're great with service, but you don't necessarily have anybody to mentor you on the number side. So that's kind of one of those things that I really liked about that piece, is when I had that opportunity. You and I got to work together for a couple of years, and when we'd have those 2 minutes, I'm like, hey, check this out. This is how this relates here. And so those are sometimes those slides that I like to work with.
Right. What are your best advice? What's your best advice for hiring and or firing?
Hiring, I guess hiring would be find somebody that passes I guess they call it the beer test, the barbecue test. Who would you like to spend that much time with? In this industry, I was when I was GM, I was there 50, 60 hours a week sometimes. So when you're there that much, I was always there. 6 hours, sometimes more. But when you're always there that much, you don't want to work with people you don't like. So that's something is like, as I hired somebody, I want to make sure they fit the culture of the restaurant and they got along with each other. So that was one of my, and my crews tend to start to hang out with each other and party together, and it's fun that they still have friendships to stay. That's the fun thing about social media. You can see who still hangs out and who's friends and that whole world.
Back to hiring. So I remember one thing I heard recently from a guy I follow, Gary Vaynerchuk. I'm sure you know him.
Yeah.
One of his responses to what's your best practices on hiring, he responded, get good at firing. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think it's important. You know, in restaurants, especially nowadays with the with minimum wage going up, it's you are measured on your prime cost, and your prime cost is a direct result of your retention. So it's important to keep the right people on. So I think before you get good at firing, get good at placement. You know, make sure you hire people into the right zone. And if you hire somebody that's a horrible hostess, you know, move them into food running and see if they do well there.
Right.
You know, move your chess pieces around before you just give up the game, and throw that one away. You know, I'd rather have a pawn here than not have one at all. So,
I remember, I think your tactic at Bracero, to me, came across as very much, you know, retention at all costs.
I think it's important because it also, your staff starts to believe you then at that point. You know, if there's a lot of, you know, hard decisions that happen, and if you can take pride and you hire slow, or you believe in the people you hire, then it's a lot, your retention stays high.
Right.
But on the other hand, if you have one employee that you're always having issues with, you know, there's a book called Good to Great, and one of the things they said is if your spouse knows the name of one of your employees, that's the one to let go. And that's great news, because, you know, it's like I go home, I don't talk about everything great at work. You know, I want to spend some time with my family, but one of those things is if you come home every single day and you're bitching about one employee, that's the employee that's taking away your energy from the rest of your staff.
Right.
Okay, so if you have a great 15 people on your front of house staff, and every single day 30% of your time is occupied by this one problem child, yes, get rid of that person. You know what I mean? And that's the rest of your staff will get more of your attention in a positive way. B, they don't have to deal with that employee either. So I think that more than if I have a problem with somebody, it's if the rest of your staff is having issues with this one employee, then that's frustrating for everybody.
What do you think has been some of the best advice you've received throughout your career?
Some best advice. Keep a mentor. That's, you know, it's really easier done when you're younger. You know, I think when you come up in the industry, there's a lot of leadership around you. So you have, you know, the GM or the SOM or the chef or any of those kind of people working with you. And as a line employee, you're like, yeah, hey, can I help with inventory? Can you teach me something? Can you do that? And so that's awesome. And I was really good at that, you know, all through my career. I think that it's better advice later in your career as well, because, you know, sometimes it's important to have someone you still listen to. And I don't, you know, it got to a point in my career where I don't listen to many people. You know,
Do you still have that?
I don't right now. You know what I mean? So I have people, I have friends, I have people I talk to, but it's not like somebody that's actually looking out for me the same way that I you know, if I was doing some bonehood thing, you would tell me, I'm sure, and I have my colleagues, but, you know, somebody that actually, you know, there's this meme that I saw years ago that says, keep working until your idols become your rivals. And, you know, hustle, you know, keep going after it. So I do that, and when you get to a point where all of a sudden the people that you looked up to are your rivals, you know, they're your business competitors, there are other people in the industry, everyone's gunning for the same job, there's a lot of politics involved, and as you go through those steps, I think that it's important to have somebody doesn't necessarily even have to get to a certain point, doesn't even need to be in your same industry, it's just somebody that has been through that level of where you are in life. And I've had a coffee with a few people and chatted with a few people, but I think that's important. No matter where you are, you know, have somebody that's been there before that you can keep trucking after.
What do you think, what would you consider to be one of the biggest failures you've had in your career, and what have you learned from it?
Biggest failure, I think I got hyped up and I got hired at a job once because of my reputation, or because, you know, I wanted to, you know, I really wanted this job, and it wasn't necessarily right. It didn't fit me and who I was like it did when I first conceived it, or I thought I was supposed to go for that job. And, you know, that's something. So I think I was kind of pigeonholed myself into this one role that I was supposed to be, and I'm going to keep going and becoming a restaurant manager or a GM or going down this certain path. And that was a failure because, you know, I didn't execute it well. You know, it wasn't necessarily me, it wasn't necessarily nobody's fault, but it was just something didn't pan out the right way that I thought it was going to pan out. And it kind of gave me a little freedom in hindsight to break away from the norm or what I thought I had to be doing. But that's something that I feel like I should, I could bring up as a failure because I was so dedicated to a certain outcome. And I didn't leave any options for flexibility. So that's something that I think, stay flexible in this industry. There's so many facets, there's so many moving parts, there's so many things that change. This industry's changed completely in the last 5 years. I think restaurants are completely changing right now. In the next 5 years is way different than it's going to be even look at it now.
What do you think the biggest change is going to be?
I think there's a lot of changes. As minimum wage and that happens, as as marijuana, and the cannabis industry affect, market share, as investors change what they're investing in, as the profitability of restaurants change, and I think that there's a lot of hustles, and I think a lot of people are becoming independent. So it's curious to me to see what happens in the next 5 years. Right now we're in this really weird window where the workforce is all millennial. Management is this Gen X small pocket of people right now. That the Zennial. That they get along with millennials fine, but they've always had to follow the rules of baby boomer. And now baby boomer still owns everything, basically. A lot of the money and the influence and the final decisions are made by old people. And it's a really hard spot for a Gen X or a management person to be in when they're following the rules of people that are so disconnected from the youth. And that's part of, one of the issues I had at one of the places I opened this last year. You have this whole young staff that's coming in, tattooed, ready to, roar, be the cockney pool place. And then you had this old dude, not feeling it. And so you had, it was a real weird dichotomy of what are we doing? Where do I even fit in here? Because I want to be there for my staff and my line employees, but I have these, old fuddy duddies that are so out of touch with reality, but they got a lot of money, so who's going to tell them what to do? So it's interesting. We'll see what happens.
Moving forward with your own hospitality company, somebody who's looking to open a restaurant, what's the biggest piece of advice that you would give them?
Open a restaurant, set the standards up front on what whenever I hire people, it's like, what do you want from them? What kind of commitment? That's something that I've seen be very successful and not successful. When we opened one restaurant, I went there and I said, hey, I expect you to know French wine. I expect you to know the basics of this. I expect you to give, care about service. And then I worked at another place and the whole staff was hired and I had nothing to do with the interview process. So all of a sudden I have all the staff members that, not saying bad things about anybody, but all of a sudden I have this mismatch of staff that don't know what the standards are. So when I do a captain's test or I try to hold people accountable, none of them know what foie gras is or truffles or, sauterne or any of these idiosyncratic, these little restaurant things that I expected them to know. And all of a sudden, for no fault of their own, they're in this situation where they have this boss that's expecting things of them that doesn't exist. So have a vision of what you want. Make sure your management, your hiring team knows what that's going to get passed on to the influence of who you're hiring and who you're going to have there. It's very difficult to go backwards. And once you have a bunch of employees that all quit their other jobs and they're all working somewhere that no one knows what's going on or the expectations. So that's an important piece about opening.
Cool. Right on, man. Thanks for your time. I appreciate it, man.
Yeah, definitely.
Hey guys, thanks again for watching another episode of HospitaliTV. Make sure to follow us on Instagram and Facebook at HospitaliTV. Make sure to follow Woody here and see his new ventures with his hospitality company on Instagram at Woody Van Horn. Guys, and last but not least, make sure to follow our amazing filming crew at Why Not Collective. That's at YKNOT Collective.
I'm following now.